Welcome to Built on Faith Homestead. Today on our Tiny House Talk Tuesday, we are going to talk about head coverings. So we got to dive into this because we don't have that long of recording capacity, and we got a lot of ground to cover. Yeah. So this may go kind of fast. If it does, I do want to apologize. Ta-da! Head coverings. Leah's doing it over there. So this is not something that we have taken lightly. This has been something we have studied out and talked about and prayed about for a couple of years now. Yeah. And so we want to tell you guys, and you guys have obviously seen the transition in our videos because Melissa, this is the first video she's done with a head covering on, right? Yeah. And we want to talk to you about why we are convinced biblically that it is good for a woman to wear a head covering, right? So we're just going to dive into this. Melissa, a couple of years ago, was reading through 1 Corinthians, and she came to me, and she said, Justin, she said, are women supposed to cover their heads whenever they pray or prophesy, the Bible says, or when they're in like public worship or whatever? Are they supposed to cover their heads? And I was like, no, that's silly. Where did you coming up with this, right? And she was like, okay, well, if that's the case, then what does this mean here in 1 Corinthians? And I'm like, I don't know, let me see it. And she gave it to me, and I read it, and I was like, well, I don't have any idea what that means, right? Because in my head, like, I had already decided, like, this is not right. Like, you should not have to cover your head to pray and all this stuff, right? Yeah. So, obviously, my, like, initial, like, thought process was, this means something else. And I just had to figure out what it means. Yeah. Right? That was my initial thought process. Now, mind you, that was my initial thought process. I do think I probably became convinced of this earlier than you did. But I didn't force Melissa at all into this. You can ask her, right? This wasn't something like every day. I'm like, you need to do this. Every once in a while she would ask me and I would say, well, this is what I think it says. Yeah. Right? But Melissa on her own actually came to this conclusion. It's something we've studied for a long time. I do a local a Bible study with some friends at a local church in Eldon, and one of their pastors was talking about it, and his wife, I think, had started using a head covering, and because of a conversation, it's because of the Lord, but then the conversation we had previously had, and I came home and told Melissa about that conversation, and Melissa jumped back into studying it some more. It's something that she had kind of, I'll let her tell the story, but from what I understand, she's kind of like, well, we're just kind of done studying that for a little while.
Yeah, I just avoided that.
Yeah, just at all costs. Our intent is not to offend you or make you think we think you're less than if you're watching this video and you don't cover your head or anything like that. We just want you to know why we came to the conclusion we did. If you know me in our ministry, in the ministry that me and my wife have, I'm very big on, like, why do you believe what you believe? What's the reasoning for it? Don't just tell me somebody told you this and now you believe it, right? Like, why? And so, and I'm also really big on, like, we need to go back to the basics of the Bible and just do what the Bible says and stop trying to make a bunch of stuff up, right? So, this is kind of how the head covering stuff started. Here is what the Bible says about it. So you'll find these scriptures in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. And most Bible teachers today will say, hey, this is a cultural issue, right? Something along the lines of this, right? Prostitutes or harlots or women that were not acting in a very womanly type way. They had short hair and they didn't have their heads covered. And the Apostle Paul instructs the Corinthians to have long hair and to have their hair covered so that they don't look like a prostitute, right? Is basically, and I'm sorry for the hard language, but that's basically the argument that I've heard from the cultural standpoint. Yeah. Is that what you've heard too? Mm-hmm. Right? And while that may be true in Corinth, I wasn't sure how to say it. In Corinth? I think it's Corinth. That's how people smarter than me say it, I think. Yeah, Corinth. So while that may be true there, here's the problem I believe with that argument, is the Apostle Paul gives the reasons why he believes that women should have their hair covered in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. And it doesn't say anything about the culture. It doesn't say anything about, like, this is the way harlots dress, and so you Christian women, since you're not harlots and you don't want to look like a harlot, then you need to have your head covered. He doesn't say any of that in this scripture, right? Is that what convinced you, like, hey, this isn't a cultural thing, or
yeah,
it was? So that's what convinced me, right? And so we'll kind of jump on into this. Verse 1, we'll probably go like verses, maybe 1 through 6 here, right? It says, "Be ye followers of me, even as I also am of Christ. Now I pray you, brethren, that ye remember me in all things, and keep the ordinances as I delivered them to you." So he's saying, listen, the ordinances I've already given you, you need to keep that stuff, and you need to keep what I'm about to tell you. He says, "But I would have you know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of a woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God. Every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonoreth his head. But every woman that prayeth or prophesy with her head uncovered dishonoreth her head. For that it is all one as if she were shaven." And this is the King James Bible, by the way, that I'm reading. So it may sound a little weird and poetic sounding because of the King James Version of the Bible. Once again, I'm not a King James only guy. I think it's a very good version. Be very careful about what versions you use. But I don't think God's going to speak to you in King James necessarily. I don't believe we're going to get to heaven and Jesus is going to be like, "Ye doth come in here." But anyhow, what this is saying in the first few verses, right, is that we all have a headship. We all have somebody over us, right? So Christ is the head of a man, right? And then men are supposed to be the head of women, right? Dun, 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 first controversial statement of the video.
But that's biblical.
It's biblical.
Like, that's the natural order that God made.
It is. It is. So then we'll kind of go through verses 6 through 10. So in those first couple verses it said, right, for a man to have his head covered, it's dishonoring, which we will get into more of that scripture here in a little while. I'll dive a little deeper into that, right? So basically, you're not going to come to church and see the preacher with a hat on. You're not going to come to church and see the preacher with a hat on praying. Why? Because of these scriptures. This is where that comes from. And so, verses 6 through 10 says, "For if the woman be not covered, let her also be shorn. But if it be a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven, let her be covered. For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, for as much as he is the image and glory of God, but the woman is the glory of man, or of the man. For the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man. Neither was the man created for the woman, but the woman for the man. For this cause ought the woman to have power on her head because of the angels." I'm going to stop right there at verse 10. And I want to tell you this. Verse 10 summarizes why the Apostle Paul is saying a woman should have her head covered, right? It is because of the order of creation, right? It goes all the way back to Genesis. And you go back and you read in Genesis how woman was created basically to complete man, right? Because God said it wasn't good that man be alone, right? And he created a woman out of the rib of man. And then after the fall, God said that you're going to have double head coverings, Lee Joe. After the fall, I don't want that on right now. After the fall, he said that that man would rule over woman. Now, when I say rule over woman, guys, I want to be very, very clear here. I don't mean boss, and I don't mean rule like with this, me man, you do what me say, right? That's not what I'm saying. So I would say much more like man needs to lead woman like Christ led, right? In a compassionate and loving and caring, still stern where you need to be stern, but loving where you need to be loving type way, and willing to die for women, right? Anyhow, so, and then of course we're told in verses 11 and 12 that man and women can't exist without each other. And then verse 13 says, "Judge in yourselves, is it comely that a woman pray unto God uncovered? Doth not even nature itself teach you that if a man have long hair, it is shame unto him, but if a woman have long hair, it is glory to her, for her hair is given her for a covering. But if any man seem contentious, we have no such custom, neither the churches of God." And we'll dive into some of these other verses a little deeper. But the point of this little part of this section is, for me, is really verse 10 really sums it up. "For this cause ought the woman to have power on her head because of the angels." Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what "because of the angels" means. There's lots of theories on it.
Yeah, there is.
But I have no idea. There's some people that say, well, the fallen angels from Genesis that slept with women, that made the giants of the day, and the whole reason God had to flood the earth, that women should actually cover their heads as an act of modesty, so that those angels won't look upon a woman, right? And her hair, because it is her glory. Then there's, well, because the angels are ministering spirits and they're ministering to people even during like church services. And so they want to see your obedience unto God, right? By covering your head. There's all these theories. I don't know. I have no idea what it means by the angels. I'm just going to be honest with you. But that's neither here nor there, because the first part of the verse says, for this cause ought the woman to have power on her head. Nowhere in all of those verses 1 through 16, did the Apostle Paul say, you need to cover your head so you don't look like a harlot.
Yeah.
Nowhere in there did he say, you need to cover your head so you don't look like a prostitute. Nowhere in there did he say, you need to cover your head to be able to be dressed like a modest woman.
Mm-hmm.
That's not anywhere in there. Yet that's the argument that I hear over and over and over again. And probably the argument I would have taken up until about a year ago. Right?
Yeah.
And so the problem with the cultural argument is the Apostle Paul states why a woman ought to cover her head. And once again, has nothing to do with the culture.
No.
Right? So the next thing that you will hear a lot of is, well, this covering that there's a lot of people that believe a woman should have a covering, but then they believe their long hair is that covering, right? Let's look at verse 5 a little closer, and I'll tell you why I don't believe the long hair is the covering. And obviously, as you can see from Melissa's head right now, she doesn't believe that either, right? Verse 5 says, but every woman that prayeth or prophesieth with her head uncovered dishonoreth her head. And I'm going to stop right there. There's more to that verse, but I'm going to stop right there. Just from the first half of that verse, but every woman that prayeth or prophesieth with her hair uncovered dishonoreth her head. There are only really two requirements for a woman to have her head covered, or two situations where a woman needs to have her head covered biblically, and it's during prayer and prophesying, right? Mm-hmm. If it's just long hair, how can she take off her long hair and put it back on in those moments, right? So say you pray in the morning, you're maybe not going to knowingly like have that private time of prayer again until nighttime. So you just take your hair off? Like, that's not going to work, obviously, right? It seems to point to a second thing there. And then the last part of it says, for that it is even as, I get really tongue-tied. For that is even all one as if she were shaven. So to me that's saying if she doesn't wear a covering, much like what Melissa's got here, right? You might as well, you might as well shave your hair. Yeah. If that means, if the first part of that verse is truly talking about long hair, right, then it would read something like, but every woman that prayeth and prophesieth with her long hair that is cut dishonoreth her head, therefore she might as well cut her hair. Yeah. Right? That doesn't make sense. Which is why I think verse 5 points to a second article, not just your hair, right? And then, for me, if you continue on to verse 13 through 16, it says, judging yourselves, is it comely that a woman prayeth unto God uncovered? He's saying, you judge, right? You be the judge, which, by the way, most of the time when the apostles or the disciples say that, they don't mean it in such a way like, this is a liberties issue and you decide what's best. Usually it's, so I hate to say it this way, but it's almost kind of a smart alecky way. Right? Is how I relate to it, because I'm a smart aleck and I have to work on that, right? But it's almost, so in the book of Acts, right, whenever the apostles were arrested and they told the Pharisees of the day and the Sadducees, they told them at the time, they said, are we, because they were Jewish leaders of the day, right? And they arrested them and they were like, are we supposed to follow man or God? You decide. You be the judge, right? Like, that wasn't like, whichever one you want to do is okay. That's not what he was saying, right? Yeah. He was saying, we know this already, but I'm going to pin you in a corner by making you admit it, right? Mm-hmm. And that seems to be what's in place here. It says, judge in yourselves. Is it comely for a woman to pray unto God uncovered? Doth not nature itself teach you that if a man have long hair, it is a shame unto him? But if a woman have long hair, it is a glory to her, for her hair is given her for a covering. And verse 15 is where people that think that hair is the covering, that's where they get it from, right? But if any man seem to be contentious, we have no such custom, neither the churches of God. To me, verses 13 through 16 make it abundantly clear that that long hair is the natural example given to us of why you should have your hair, even your hair covered, right? So Romans, the first part of Romans kind of alludes to something similar to this when it's like nature itself bears witness of God, right? We don't believe that nature is God. We just believe that nature bears witness of the creation, of what God created, that God created everything, that there's a higher power than ourselves, right? It doesn't mean that nature is God. And that's what a lot of people, I think, do with this verse, is they say, well, even nature itself teaches you, right? If man have long hair, it's a shame. But if woman have long hair, it's her glory. And since nature teaches it, then it's okay. Then just do it that way, right? When it's actually talking about still that second article referenced back over, I believe, in verse 5, right? And so, while it's good, and I believe a woman should have long hair, now you can debate on what you think long hair is, right? But it also seems to speak of a second article over there in verse 5. And so, right, we don't believe it's cultural, and this is why we told you the cultural argument. We don't believe it's just long hair. And we told you that. And it says again, right, you might as well be shaven. If you already have shaved hair or cut hair or short hair, then what does it change by cutting it even shorter or making you bald, right?
Yeah.
It says that you might as well just go ahead and have your head covered, right? If you don't have it covered, you might as well have it shaved. Yeah. And so, that's the reason why we don't believe it is just long hair. So then the other argument is that this is just men trying to stomp on women and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And show their authority and big bad men. And while I'm not denying that some of that probably does exist, right? And some of that certainly does exist, right? To use that argument for everything in the Bible that says that something that women or men ought not to do is kind of ridiculous, I think, right? So if you think it's sexist or you think it's men being too much of a butthead, to say, you know what, you probably ought to cover your head because the Bible teaches that. Do you believe it would be sexist for a woman to say in a church service, if a young man comes in with his hat on, right, he comes into the church service, and sits down, and some old lady kind of taps him on the shoulder and says, sir, would you mind taking your hat off, right? Is that sexist? Is that, right? You see what I'm saying? Yeah. If we tell a man that he shouldn't be fornicating, is that sexist? No, it's just trying to help them walk with the Lord the way that they're supposed to walk with the Lord. The same way that I believe telling women, hey, you probably should wear a head covering. Because it seems to me like the Bible teaches that. It's not sexist or some sort of me man and watch me roar, right? No. It's just saying, I want the most for you, and I want the best for you as a woman.
And
right?
he did not make me wear this just to make that
clear. No.
Justin didn't make me do this.
No, I like the way my face is arranged. I wouldn't fix it. No, I'm just playing. But we do cook with cast iron, everybody, so watch out. No. No, I didn't. And on purpose, right? Because I didn't want that to ever be a place where the devil could come in and try to cause a wedge for you, right? Yeah. Now, once again, when Melissa would ask me, what do you think this means? Once I got convinced of it, I would tell her, right? It seems to me like a woman ought to wear a head covering. Mm-hmm. But then but you study it out and you pray about it and you let me know how you think about it and what you think about it, right? I wanted to be very, very graceful and very, very careful in that because, like I said, I didn't want Satan, if she started wearing a head covering, I didn't want Satan to come in, right, while she's trying to sleep at night and going, you're only doing that because your husband's making you and he's being a jerk, and don't think for a minute that Satan won't do that because he certainly will, right? So, I know I went really, really fast, but those are the reasons why we don't think it was cultural, we don't think it's just long hair, and we don't think it's sexist for a woman to wear a head covering. Now, I want to ask you this, Melissa, and give you a chance to talk, because I've just been going 90 to nothing here. Why do you wear it? Why do you wear yours all the time?
Well, so I wear mine all the time because I know for my walk with God, I talk to God throughout the day. Sometimes I fail, sometimes,
Yeah.
But generally, I talk to God throughout the day. And I don't want to have to, I gotta go get my head covering, so I run into the other room to do that. I don't want to have to do that all the time. And so that's why, the Bible talks about we should pray without ceasing. So for myself, as far as the head coverings go, it's just easier to do that.
Yeah.
So.
And I know, like we say, our blessing over our food, and ask the Lord to bless it, right?
Yeah.
You'd have to go find it then. And then Melissa does our grocery shopping, right? And we are a pastoring family. And so we may run into somebody from the church at Walmart,
Yeah.
right? And then be like, will you pray for me? And you pray for them real quick. And she didn't
Yeah.
want to have to be like, oh, I need a head covering and all that jazz,
Yeah.
right? She just wanted to wear it all the time. Now, I have heard some of the other teachings of people that wear head coverings. And they said, well, a woman needs to wear it all the time because they need to be praying without ceasing. But then there are men that wear these all the time, too, when they're working. It's not in church services or when they're praying, maybe, but when they're working and stuff, they wear hats, right? And me, being the little debater that I can be, was like, okay, then why are you wearing hats? Because you're supposed to be not covered when you're praying, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was asking the Lord about that, and I was praying about it, and I said, all right, Lord. So whenever I get down and I pray, right, or even when I'm talking to the Lord, working and driving down the road or whatever, a lot of times I'll take my hat off, just because I've always, this scripture aside, have always felt like it was just the respectful thing to do.
The honoring, respecting.
Right, it's how I was raised up,
yeah.
Right, and so I was like, all right, Lord. So Melissa's been convinced she needs to wear a head covering. I fully support that, her being convinced. In fact, not only do I support it, I believe it's the right thing to do. With all that I've got, right? Like, I think she's doing the right thing here. Do I need to not ever wear a hat again? Like, is that the deal? Well, I like hats, but if I'm not supposed to wear it, I won't. Like, that's fine. You know what I mean? And the way I understood it as I was praying was, once again, if I am outside working and I need to have that, what I would call very personal time of prayer with the Lord, right? It's really easy for me to take my hat off. Mm-hmm. If I am at Walmart and somebody wants me to pray with them, it's really easy for me to take my hat off. It is way harder for you to go find a head covering or to carry it in your pocket, along with the sippy cups and the diaper bags and right? Like all that stuff. Yeah. It is just easier for you to wear it all the time. And when we talked about it and Melissa asked me something about wearing it all the time, I'm like, go for it, right? If you want to wear it all the time, wear it all the time. Yeah. I'm good with it, right? So, in the short while that you have been doing this, what has it been? Maybe a week or so?
Just a little over a week.
Little over a week.
Yeah.
Have you?
Like all the time.
Yeah. We've been studying it for a couple of years. Yeah. How has it changed your walk with the Lord? Like, why have you noticed a difference, or are you just doing it because out of obligation and you're like, whatever, we'll just do it?
No. It has blessed me a lot, in my walk with God. So I had first started doing it, when we first started studying it, I was talking to Justin about it, and he was like, well, just try it, in like your private prayer time, and I remember the first time I ever did that. I got the kids in bed and stuff, and I knelt down beside the bed to pray, and the Lord just poured His Spirit down on me. And as a woman, or for me, my emotions are strong, and I know that and stuff. And I was just bawling. I was a mess. And even I remember last week too, talking about how the Lord affects my walk. I felt like my any anger or impatience that I've had is a lot less. I
would agree to that. Please don't be offended. But
it's a lot less.
I would agree to that, actually.
And I homeschool, and I was doing school it was like the second day or something that I was wearing it, and like all the time. And the Lord blessed us during our school so much. I had more patience, and Luella did it without any fuss, and she was just proud of herself, for what she'd accomplished and stuff, and there was just joy in that. And during my prayer time, I'd feel just closer to Him in general. In my heart, I just feel closer when I talk to him, you know, that he genuinely hears me and cares. And I want to honor him. I want to honor Justin too. But I want to honor my head, and I think he blesses that very much. So
yeah, completely changed your walk with the Lord, right?
Yeah.
In a good way.
Yeah.
In a good way. All right, so then I'm gonna ask another question, because you guys will see in our videos, and I take a picture before the video. We may use it, I don't know. But if you see our girls, right, our two little girls, you will notice that they are also wearing a head covering.
Yeah.
Quite a bit.
And when I started wearing a head covering, of course, that's kind of when you have daughters, you know, they want to do what I do.
Organically, that's how it started, right?
Yeah,
was
that's
like,
how it started.
Mom's doing that, I like that, and I want one, right? It's kind of where Luella and Leah both
but I felt like
started. But then what happened, right?
I felt like I was supposed to explain to them why.
Yeah.
Why I started wearing one, and that Mommy didn't always, you know.
Yeah, like 2 weeks ago you weren't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, but like from my whole life,
yeah,
like, I didn't wear one.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I was supposed to explain it to them.
Yeah. So, and we both, as we were studying this out some more, and probably even deeper, once we, I think, both kind of accepted it, I think we were able to then actually glean more out of it once we were willing to quit putting up walls and saying, hey, I don't want to do this, to, okay, God, we believe this to be right. Please help us understand this, right? Yeah. I actually don't think, I think this has very little to do, chapter 11 and the head coverings has very little to do to honoring your husband, and much more to do with honoring the natural order of the way God has set things up.
I hope that didn't come out weird.
Yeah.
Did it?
No, I don't think it did at all. But I think that for our girls, we wanted Luella, I almost called her Melissa because she looks just like you. Yeah. We wanted Luella and Leah, we wanted them to go ahead and start understanding that headship of the way God created things, right?
Yeah.
And being okay with that, especially in the world that we live in today. And I think we both realize, like, this isn't just for wives, this is for women.
Yeah.
And if we're going to raise our daughters the most godly way that we know how, we need to go ahead and so Luella naturally, like, she wants to wear dresses all the time.
Yeah, I didn't.
And I don't think, let me
anything.
be very careful here. Dresses are good. If you want to wear a dress. I don't think it's necessarily required. I think that you're not supposed to look like a man, and men aren't supposed to dress like a woman.
That's what it says.
Right. Now, that being said, like, Luella just naturally, she gravitates towards dresses. Leah does too, right? They want to wear those kinds of things. And so they naturally want to do womanly things. They want to take care of their baby dolls, right? And they'll walk around and shh with them and all kinds of stuff, right? Trying to quiet them down, the little baby dolls, and act like they're crying or whatever, you know. Because God has put that into them now. Well, they're kids, right? Because that's how God has made them. And so whenever they started wanting to wear these head coverings, as we were trying to understand it better, I believe we both came to the conclusion that this is really to recognize the natural order of God. And if they want to now, we need to go ahead and encourage that. Then when they get a little bit older and they don't want to, we'll have to push it. And then whenever they get a little bit older and want to rebel, we're probably going to have to let them rebel, right? Yeah. And unfortunately, and kind of work through that then. But we both feel like it's the right thing to do for our kids. One other thing I wanted to talk about too, before we did this, was before we go a little bit further or start to end this, is something I didn't bring up earlier that I should have. It says, but I would have you know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of every woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God. And I want to stop there. That's verse 3. This whole chapter teaches submission for both men and women. This isn't just about women. And everyone focuses on that, and I get it. Because, like, Melissa, if we use it from just the woman's standpoint, Melissa has to wear a head covering, right? She feels like she should. When she goes to church, there's no, not necessarily hiding that belief, but there's no, like there's different belief systems in church. Let's say at your church, there may be people that's a pre-tribulation believer, a post-tribulation believer, and a mid-tribulation believer, right? those three people may not ever know the other one believes differently than they do. They don't have to wear a pin on their shirt that's like, I'm post-trib and I'm pre-trib, right? But when you believe in head coverings, there's not a whole lot of hiding that, right? It's not like, I'll just kind of put this on and hope nobody notices, right? Like, people's going to see it. And so I think that's why we focus somewhat on women in this study. But it's speaking just as much about men as far as not wearing a head covering whenever you are prophesying, whatever prophesying is, that's a whole other deal. But whatever you believe it is, in praying, that you shouldn't wear a hat. Which means that men, you need to submit, right, to that and take it seriously, right? Just as much as a woman ought to take it seriously to cover her head, right? And so... don't get hung up, women, on like this whole chapter just teaches that I've got to be this submissive woman I don't want to be, right? It also, men, it's also talking to you. You need to submit as well, according to verse 3. And this is why. Let me find it here. Verse 4 says, every man praying or prophesying having his head covered dishonoreth his head. Okay, well, that's not talking about the man's head. Who is the head of man? It is Christ. So when a man wears his hat, when he wears his hat or a head covering, praying or prophesying, he's not dishonoring himself necessarily. He's dishonoring God. He's dishonoring Christ. Like, you're not dishonoring you. You're throwing mud in the face of Christ.
Yeah.
And women, whenever you are praying and prophesying without your head being covered, it's not just your head that you're dishonoring in verse 5, but it's it's either your husband or that preacher that you really like, or and then ultimately you're dishonoring Christ because you're dishonoring God by dishonoring the natural order of the way God set things in order, right? So that dishonor is not just like causing shame on you, but it's causing shame on Christ, right? Because we're told who our heads are through these scriptures, right? Who our leaders are, and so. This is probably a little weightier matter than we've treated it over the years, right? Yeah, it's uncomfortable, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm really uncomfortable.
Yeah, it makes it not very much fun. And I'm gonna tell you, there's gonna be women that watch this that disagree, and men that disagree full-heartedly with us.
Sorry if anybody is mad or anything.
Yeah, it is not our heart.
No, I don't want to make people mad or offended. It's just something I've been studying out for literally like a year or two.
Yeah.
Probably. And I was doing it some in private. And then we got busy in life and everything, and I didn't do it, and I was just completely avoiding it, hoping Justin just let it alone. I even told him that. I said, let it alone. I said, just don't worry about it. And, that's the wrong thing to say and to do. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But, we got to take the whole Bible, not just part of it.
Not just a part,
Yeah. And I'm sure it looks silly, to some, because that's not what people do. That's not what people do now.
Right.
People used to wear head coverings.
So I was going to talk about that next, right? So if you see old church pictures, like pre-1950s, most of the women had some sort of bonnet or hat on in church.
Even I was born in the 90s, and I didn't wear it every Sunday, but Mom would have me wear a
church
hat, like for Easter and
Easter hats was still a big
that,
thing.
And
So, once again, our heart is not to, do this and then offend you or try to pick on you or make fun of you, right? Melissa's only been doing this a couple weeks now.
Yeah.
Right? But our heart is to, the whole reason we started this channel was we learned about all these wild edibles and how good they are and how good they are for you. And we wanted to share that with the world. And we wanted to share it because we knew it would bless you or could bless you in a time of need. We started the wild edibles whenever we didn't hardly have anything money-wise, and we were trying to supplement our income, or trying to supplement our food and all that kind of stuff, right? This is how we look at this head covering right now as this study that we're doing on here for you guys. And I'm also going to post this on my Leaving Egypt Bible study page, right? But we have found something that has blessed us greatly.
Yeah.
And we want to share that with you because we believe that it could bless you as well.
Yeah, and I encourage you, please read it.
Study it.
maybe try it. What would it hurt? Maybe try it in your prayer. If you feel like you're supposed to, you try it in your prayer time and see what God does for you,
And I told you guys, I was convinced probably before Melissa was of these scriptures. I didn't push her, but I was probably convinced of it a little quicker than she was. And right, maybe it's a little easier. I just take my hat off, no problem, right?
Yeah.
And my wife has to cover her head. That's gonna be a lot harder on her, right? But I will tell you that it took me probably a good year of studying and praying to be convinced of it. And this is what I found out I was doing whenever I was reading these scriptures and studying them, trying to figure out what to do, because I wanted to lead the best way possible, right? I kept making excuses of why we didn't have to do what the Bible said.
Yeah.
Right? It's cultural. It doesn't apply to us today. Maybe there are other things that apply to us today, but this doesn't. And, I study the history of Corinth and all that good stuff and figure out why this doesn't apply. And as I was praying, I kind of felt like God was telling me, why are you trying to find ways around my word? Because if you've ever heard me preach, I'm real quick to say in my preaching, of course, when the Spirit's on you and you're bold, you're quick to say lots of things, but quick to say, right, we need to be shaped and molded by the scriptures. We don't need to shape and mold the scriptures to us. But that's what I did for like a year, was like, here this is, this applies to them and not us.
Yeah.
Right? And for some of you, listen, I need to settle down. I'm going to get anxious here and get a little riled up. Go over to chapter 12 real quick. Spiritual gifts. That's going to be chapter 12. A whole bunch of you watching this probably believe in spiritual gifts. So a whole bunch of our church family, if any of you are watching this, I know my church family well enough to know most of you believe in every spiritual gift that's there. And praise the Lord, I do too. And they're all in use today. Don't let anybody tell you no different. It is part of the power of God. Mm-hmm. Right? Do you know what the argument is that a lot of people use that don't believe in spiritual gifts? That it was just for that time. That it was just for that culture. That it was just for the apostles of the day.
Snap.
Yeah. But some of you that believe in spiritual gifts are going to go back over there to Corinthians 11 and go, doesn't apply to me today. And that's the first time Melissa's hearing that because it just hit me. But
I just don't want to be that person that is like, I'm not going to do that. Like, right. I'm going to look silly.
So we've been that person for like 2 years.
I am super shy, guys. If you know me, like church families, I am super shy.
Yeah.
You think I wanted to go into church and go around town and send to Walmart?
Oh, we had to hype ourselves up to go to church.
Wearing our head covering. I was so nervous to go to church.
And I'm going to be honest with you guys.
With the head covering.
Our church family is very supportive.
Yes.
And very, very, very nice people. Loving, kind people. And you know that. And you know that they're not going to be mean or rude.
No.
Right? Like we all say mean or rude things on accident sometimes, right? Sometimes like it's not our heart and type people. Right? But like we know that. But at the same time, like we were like we need to pray. We need to pray when we get to the church.
That whole week,
yeah,
Satan was fighting me like crazy, and the rest of the family.
Yeah, it was terrible.
It was awful.
Yeah,
and
terrible. Not fun.
But I'm just not one to be bold like that. Yeah. And but despite that, the Lord's been blessing, and so I encourage you to try it.
Study it out.
That's how I feel about it. But
study it out. And be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Be honest with yourself and say, why do I not want to do this?
Yeah.
So, and here's how I'm going to kind of try to end this best that I can. Men, I believe part of the reason why we don't teach this is because we are scared to death that we're going to offend our women. And I'm going to come to you from a man's perspective and say, I completely understand that. Right? I have absolutely, listen, guys, I get in enough trouble here at the house. Because I'm a stubborn, red-bearded, hard-headed man. Right? It's okay. But I am. And I know that about myself. I said to myself, I know, right? And I don't want to purposefully offend my wife. I'm not looking for extra fights. We get enough arguments.
Maybe that's why I read it first.
That's why God made you read it first. It probably was. Maybe that was it. Right? I'm not looking for an extra fight, guys. I mess up enough, right? I'm not looking for an extra thing for me and my wife to disagree about, right?
Yeah.
Which I don't want it to sound like we have like a contentious household. That's not it, right? But we're humans and we argue and we disagree about things, right? We have a video, right? We fight too, like one of those type of videos. Like I don't want to offend my wife. I don't want to be like, hey, hon, you need to do this, and I don't really care if you like it or not. But at the same time, I want my wife to have the closest possible walk with the Lord that she can have. And I want to encourage that in her. And I want to bless her in that. And I want to try to fan that flame of the Spirit of God down inside of her that she may have the closest walk possible. And if I'm going to do that, that means that sometimes we have to have hard conversations. And maybe this is a study you and your wife do if you're married, right? Maybe this is a study you and your wife do at home. And you guys start to work through this. And just see where you land on it. And I'm going to tell you this. If you land in a different spot than I did, I'm not going to point at you and be like, you heathen. No. Right? Not at all. I tell you what I'm most scared of. Can I tell you what I'm most scared of now that are you got anything else you want to say that's not silly? Because I'm going to say something silly.
I don't think so.
Don't think so. We go to a lot of Mennonite and Amish stores. And I have this beard, right? And a huge reason why I have this beard is because my wife said, hey, I would like for you to grow your whole beard out instead of just the goatee. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, I'll try it. No, I wasn't actually. I was like, it grows in all patchy and crazy looking. It's not that I don't have like the best beard in the world type of facial hair, right? And she was like, just try it. And yeah, it's kind of long, but it has to be because I got big bald spots everywhere. I have to have long hair. I have to let it grow. But you know why I have it? It's because my wife likes it. And I've grown to like my beard. Like I don't dislike it, right? But ultimately, my wife really likes for me to wear a beard. So I have a beard, right? Because I want to make her happy. So we go to a lot of Amish and Mennonite stores. Not only do I have a beard, I wear suspenders. You know why I wear suspenders? Because my wife one day said, hon, I think suspenders would look really good on you instead of wearing a belt all the time. And I was like, no, suspenders going to look stupid. I got a big old fat belly. I'm going to look like a bowling ball. And I tried it. And I was like, listen, I don't care what they look like. These things are comfortable. And my wife likes me wearing suspenders. So here we are, going to Amish and Mennonite stores. Me wearing suspenders and a beard. And now my wife and kids are going to wear head coverings. I'm scared they're going to speak to us in Dutch. Or like German or whatever it is they speak to themselves. And I'm going to have to be like, sorry guys, we're not really Mennonite or Amish.
Well, I've already gotten some looks.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Not that I don't have anything against the Mennonite or the Amish. I don't know their doctrine well enough to pick on them. And the fruit that I see, the evidence of how they live their life and stuff, seems to be very good to me. Mm-hmm. Right? I don't have nothing against. If you're watching this is going to sound funny, but I know some of you Mennonites and some of you Amish maybe are allowed to watch some of this. If you're watching this and you think I'm making fun of you, I'm not making fun of you. I'm just worried that I'm going to offend in that situation some, right? Yeah. And I don't want to offend there either. Yeah. To recognize that.
Oh, what got me when I was like, should I or shouldn't I? Was the last verse, verse 16, literally says,
oh, yeah.
Don't be contentious.
Should have covered this verse earlier. I hope you're still watching this.
Don't be contentious. That means, like, don't fight about it.
Don't fight about it.
Don't argue about it.
So this is one of the arguments, right? And man, I should have covered this earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, I should have covered this earlier. It says, but if any man seem contentious, we have no such custom, neither the churches of God. Some people use that to say that the churches of God don't have a custom of covering their head. Can I tell you for a second how absolutely ridiculous that argument sounds? Because that's what I thought the first time I read it. It really was. And as I went to YouTube World and everybody else, or Googling and whatever, you found a lot of people that was like, look, obviously he's saying that they don't have this type of thing that they do. The Apostle Paul just instructed the women to cover their head and the men to uncover their head. Do you really think at the end of it he would go, but by the way, none of the other churches do this, right? Nobody else does this. No. I don't think that's what he's saying at all. I think he's saying this is so common that we don't even argue about this. This is our custom. Women wear head coverings. Men don't cover their head. This is just how we operate.
Yeah.
Don't fight about this. If you want to fight about it, let them know that that's a ridiculous argument because we don't even fight about it. Yeah. And like Melissa said, don't be contentious about it.
That just was the final thing for me.
Final nail in the coffin.
I was like, okay.
All right then.
So I took that leap of faith.
Yes. And so much so that now she wants to start making her own head coverings,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm excited to see.
Yeah,
I'm
me too.
excited. Yeah, fun stuff. Guys, thank you guys for watching. Please don't be offended. If we offend you, I'm very, 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 very sorry. I don't mean to offend you.
No.
If the Bible offends you, take it up with the Lord. Yeah. Guys, we love you guys. Appreciate
Love
you
you
watching.
guys.
This is why we believe in head coverings. Not just not just my wife, who is beautiful, and not just me, who is ugly, but we believe we do believe in it. This is why. And if you know us and you see us at church and you see us wearing head coverings, this is why.
Yes.
There you go. Appreciate you guys. Catch you next time.
See you guys.